populations are ageing around the world much more rapidly than in the past.
The older generation is quite fit and active and represents the majority. Solidarity between generations works in the family. Solidarity between generations in society is slowly eroding, on the other hand. In the state pension scheme, the old are financed by the young. But the age structure is changing. More old people are demanding their pension from fewer young people. The funds are shrinking rapidly. Should the young pay more or the old work longer? Millennials put more value on the work-life balance, and they are already at home in the digital world. The younger generation is much more environmentally conscious. Less meat and healthier food are trendy. Vegetarian and vegan products have become marketable. Politically, the younger generation has different visions, but the elders have the majority vote.
We want to be open to the idea of travelling, the idea of just jumping on the Eurostar and going to France, the fact that you can live and work all across the EU with no problems. And specifically young people, you know, we are the ones who primarily voted to remain in the EU, and it's us that it's going to affect for the longest.
I think it's really sad. I saw a really good quote, which was British grandparents hate foreigners more than they love their grandchildren. I think that's kind of a good way of summing it up. And I think there should have been a lot more social responsibility and people to understand that the world, you know, has changed.
The younger generation has to live in a world decided by the older generation. What can we do to bridge the generational divide?
Guten Abend und
good evening and welcome. Young people today have bad manners, live in luxury and hate authority. They don't listen to their parents and they tyrannize their teachers. Those aren't my words. That was Socrates 2,500 years ago. You can see that the generation gap is not something that's just arisen. As for today, well, we can say that bad manners aren't the exclusive property of the young people. There are some 70-year-olds who show bad manners. And tomorrow, the new US president is going to be inaugurated, so although that's not our subject today, it does have a bearing on it. We always say to our young people, you mustn't lie. Now, whether Donald Trump has taken that advice on board is dubious. The question is whether or not he actually believes in climate change and whether the accusations are of being a racist, for example. Is he a racist because he wants to throw the current incumbent out of the White House? Well, I'll leave those accusations to one side. He's a democratically elected president. The question you have to ask is, are there any limits to stupidity beyond the borders of Mexico and Canada? These are questions that we're not going to address directly today. What we've been talking about at the World Economic Forum are the signals that we're looking at in the world today. We're hearing that young and old people both feel that we're living in times where it's difficult to predict where we're heading, and that obviously has an effect on the general mood. But our mood isn't a pessimistic one this evening. We want to address this question cheerfully, but with the due weight that we need to give it. It's a considerable question. What can we do to ensure that young and old move forward together to a bright future? So I have a number of guests here. We have an audience here today, which is of a young average age, let me say, probably 50% below the average Swiss age, but it's great to see so many young people here this evening. And we've got a wonderful panel as well. Allow me to introduce them, beginning with you, President. First of all, I'd like to know from you how close you felt to other generations when you were growing up. Did people come to you and say, one day you will be president of Switzerland? Well, thank you very much for coming this evening to the open forum. I had the fortune to grow up in a home which was a small house, but we had our grandmother who lived on the first floor. So we had there were four of us kids. We had our grandmother, our single aunt came to visit us quite often. So when I was growing up, I certainly was in contact with the other generations and have very fond memories of it. I did have arguments with my parents, and often my grandmother was on my side. So she was a kind of judge in the household, was she? Yes, that's right. So we in Switzerland had, when I was growing up, had ways of addressing our parents respectfully. I'm trying to be respectful to you, for example, as well this evening, Mr. President, in addressing you. I wonder whether these conventions are still applicable today and whether we should try to preserve them. But moving on from that, I'm going to turn to our next panelist. You've worked in forestry. You have experience in that area. How was it for you growing up, and how close were the generations? Well, not so close. Maybe I'm making up for that now in my current job. My parents were relatively old when I was born. I had an older sister who was significantly older than me, and my grandfather on my father's side was someone I can only remember ever seeing once. I had godparents who were somewhat weird in that context of that time, and we also had situations where children came to our house, and I had a grandmother who also made her opinions clearly known when she was with us. Giannina Caviezel, you are the founder of Student Impact Switzerland. We are going to talk about what you have been doing at the University of St. Gallen, and you've been working on sustainability, which is very important. Hopefully we'll come to talk about that. What about the relationship with the other generations when you were growing up? Well, I was fortunate enough to grow up with my great-aunt, my grandmother, my cousins in the same apartment. And throughout my childhood, our grandparents were present. We often had meals with our other relations. So I was very much in that extended family and with the elder generations as I grew up. So very close relations within your family. What about beyond your family? Yes, well, beyond the family, less contact there, and that really hasn't changed. I generally work with young people, and I've probably reduced the level of contact I have with the older generation.
Keyvan Ghavami aus
Keyvan Ghavami from the French-speaking part of Switzerland. I'm sure that you understand everything fluently, but is going to be speaking in English. I'm sure that the young amongst you will understand him perfectly. So, a question to you, Mr. Ghavami. How was it in your family, and beyond your family, what was the relationship like with other generations?
All right. Hi there. Sorry. So I'm going to speak in English and not in French, unfortunately, for me. But anyway, I grew up in a big family. I have 3 smaller brothers and my 2 parents. So we 6 at home, and quite big, I guess. And we grew up also with the grandparents of my father's side, not from my mother's side. And so we were very close within the family and also with our grandparents, and we were able to learn a lot from each other, I think, and go through all the different phases of life also together. Although I'm still young, I think the chance to be able to grow with older generation is very important. And interestingly enough, also from my father's side, my father is Iranian, my mother German, so also a mix of culture, which brought an additional experience to the whole thing.
Stimmt das Klischee?
There's a cliche that Iranian families give more importance to the relationships between generations.
Okay. I would say. But it's, I guess it's the whole Middle Eastern region, and I guess it's the same maybe in Germany or in other big families. But we are, very close to each other, and it's a dinner organized at home during the weekends. It's there's always an excuse to see each other and to meet, and it's right that the family is quite important, at least to me. I guess for my other brothers as well. But,
Und dann hätte ich das auch.
Another thing I should have said, you're here as well because you have started something that's very exciting in this area. You're a co-founder and president of Act on Your Future. What does Act on Your Future do?
So Act on Your Future is a non-profit foundation. We launched it with 2 other people in Geneva, and we're trying to foster and strengthen civic engagement among the younger generation on one side, and we do that by organizing programs and projects in education and culture, working together with high schools in the Geneva region and museum, art galleries, and private corporations as well. So we try basically to show them how we can, at our level in Switzerland, engage and learn more about human rights, and to show also that it should start here, and you don't need basically to go to Syria or any other country facing human rights violations to be concerned and not only concerned about it, but also to do your difference at your level. So that's about it.
Ich hätte auch Sie fragen schon sollen.
Ms. Caviezel, I should have asked you, what does Student Impact Switzerland do? Well, it's another kind of enterprise consultation. We support sustainable startups. We provide management consulting. We go and look at their ideas, and we try to support those ideas in various business areas. For example, business plans, marketing, and we do that with students. So we offer them the possibility for this support during their education, and we use our know-how to help them start enterprises that can make a positive contribution to a sustainable world. You yourself are very young, but you're working intensively with even younger people. What's your feeling towards them? Do you see them as young brothers or sisters in the same generation, or do you think they're a part of another generation? Well, the youngest worker of Student Impact is 10 years younger, and you can see the differences there, in not just in facial features, but also in their attitude. So let's have a first reality check. Now, looking out, I can see that there are variations in age. You're all young to me. But I want to ask, let's try and get a feel here. Laura Tyler, you're 18, I believe. You're sitting in the first row. And you are Swiss, I believe. One of your parents is Swiss. Lara, what's your link with the elder generations like? When I was young, I had a relationship with my grandparents, which was excellent. It was a kind of opportunity to really get spoiled going there for the weekends. So it was a good relationship. Today I can see that the elder generation are more active. They really want to participate in life after their retirement. And so you come across them, say, on the way to school, but I don't really have a relationship with them outside of that. Kitya is 18, up to the age of 9, you lived in India. What's your relationship like with the older generation? I have a lot of contact with the older generation. We have good relations with our grandparents. We also travel to India regularly, where I see elder family. I was there until 9, at the age of 9. I was at my grandparents almost every day. We went home to them. Well, we didn't live with them, but we visited them every day after school because we'd pass their home on the way back. And outside the family, I'm doing a placement. Last summer, I worked in the local hospital, working with older people, really getting to know them. And I've also worked in the YMCA local organization, which also provides support for the elder generation. So I have this. When would you say you can call someone member of an older generation? Well, from my experience, I think people who are, say, 10 years older than me have a lot more experience. But you wouldn't say that once you're 29-year-old. Well, let's say 35. If we can, I think we can meet and agree on 35. Kimberly Oakley, you're 19. Your father is Swiss, your mother's from Thailand. Where do you see that border lying? I would say around 35, but it could be 40 if... Well, you're very tolerant. Yes, I think you could describe me as tolerant. And what was your experience like with the elder generation? I didn't have a very big family, and I had a relationship with my grandmother, but not so often. My relations with the elder generation are really outside the family. I work in an association where we work with the elder generation, 66 plus. Sorry, I don't mean to offend anybody. No, it's okay. We can speak openly today. We can have a drink after all of this. So yes, we work with the generation in their generations in their 60s. And what happens when you come together with these elder people in this association? Do you fall into age groups? Well, no, not at all. We have the kids who are together, 6 to 16, and then 16 to 66-year-olds are all together. No, you don't. You don't have to beat around the bush with us. You can be perfectly honest. Duarte man, a German father, Brazilian mother. How is it for you? Well, I having listened to others would say that I'm probably the one who's had the least contact with my grandparents. I try to see them regularly, but I've never lived with them in the same house. So my relations with the older generation in general are probably mostly through my parents, not through school. Perhaps you could say my teachers. They're not that old, but we could say they're mature. I think in the future this is going to become a big issue. President, how do you see the divide between the generations? Do you see it as a concern? I don't see it as a huge divide. Obviously, you have different perspectives depending on your generation. Young people have their careers ahead, others who are more mature in the middle of it. And once you are in your career, I suppose, you meet people from different generations, then your experience changes. So I wouldn't see it as a divide or a gulf between the generations. I do hear from a lot of people. Sometimes I get proper letters written on paper. Those mostly come from people my age or above. If I'm hearing from people who are of the younger generation, then it's an email or a Snapchat, using other means to contact me. But whatever means of communication are being used, it's the communication that's important. I don't think there's any gulf between the interests of the various generations. So can you use any means of communication? Is it possible to tweet you, for example? Well, messages come to the communications department, not directly to me, but you can send emails to the official address and they get through to me relatively quickly. When I'm in the car or on the train, I try to look through the emails that have been sent me. It's always a surprise for people if I do respond directly. Well, I think that's a very nice side to life in our country. Power isn't too distant from the people. It's possible to get a direct email from the president. What about meeting people when you're traveling? Well, I think that the concentration threshold with young people is perhaps shorter. We tend to have shorter conversations anyway, but they are very well informed. They know what's going on in the world. So the conversations which we have in, for example, the youth parliament is very impressive. They know a lot, and it's also very interesting to hear what their concerns are, and you can only hear their concerns if you listen. Well, there's an interesting distinction there between contact with the generations within the family and then beyond. Why is it so important to distinguish between them? Well, development of the relations is different. If you look within the family, then we used to have more extended families where you'd have uncles and aunts and a lot of different contact with various members of the family. Today, there's more distance. We tend to live in the nuclear families, and the contact between children, parents, and grandparents is common. Often grandparents are very present, but what's interesting now today is that great-grandparents are also quite present. So the third generation, which are still still in good health, have now to care for the fourth generation. Now, here's my question that I'd like to ask. How would you divide these generations up? First generation in education, the second generation in work, third generation in retirement, and fourth generation 80 and beyond. So the third generation 65 to 80, 80 and beyond is the fourth generation. So that idea of being very old when you're very frail and fragile, that age seems to have increased. When I began working on the news in Switzerland, we always had a symbol when we talked about pensions of a old person sitting at home, 102 years old or so, and I used to think when I was young that that age where you started to be very old was far lower. This old idea of old people who'd sit in front of their houses. Who'd sit in front of their houses and nothing would happen all day. These are images from the past. And that seems to have changed now. It doesn't seem to apply anymore, that the threshold for old age seems to have increased. If you're healthy, you can still not be old at the age of 79. This is what the experts are telling us. Yes, well, there's calendar ages, if you'd like, and biological age. For older people, I think there are huge differences. You have very healthy elderly people, others who are financially well supported, others whose health is failing, who might live alone or have financial difficulties. So there's a huge range of different situations. So the fourth generation is the one that we focus on in our work, and we ask the third generation as well whether they would like to voluntarily help in order to make life better for the fourth generation, the over 80s. So there is a kind of exchange between the generations, and the first generation is also involved, young people. We have a project which brings grandparents or great-grandparents into the classroom, where someone who's already in retirement comes in and helps the school, helps the pupils, and sometimes the school kind of adopts school adopts grandmothers because their school students' real grandparents are very far away. In the 70s, we had this context of the Cold War. What we need are perhaps measures that would improve relations in society. I think we had that back in the 70s. Do we have it today? Well, we've undertaken a number of reforms which provide pension reforms, for example, which do promote better relations between generations. I remember the president of the university in Aargau working to provide computer education from young people to old people. That was a great success. I think other institutions picked up on that, and then it became a book project because the young people realized, for example, that they had skills that they could also learn from the elder people, such as cookery skills. The older people who'd been learning computer skills shared their best recipes with the younger people who needed those kind of skills, and the cookbook came out of that. So it doesn't have to be a huge national policy. Quite often, these can be small local initiatives that really do benefit relations between the generations. And it's all fueled by this idea that you shouldn't just sit around at home and just think that generations don't get on. They really can do. So, are you doing something in order to promote these relations, Giannina, in your work? Well, not directly, but I think communication is really important. I think that the student impact focuses more on the overall issues that we're facing. We have projects where we've taken approaches where, for example, we bring generations together within projects where young people help elder people to become more familiar with new technologies. But those are more kind of marginal projects rather than central projects. Mr. Ghavami, what about Act on Your Future? Is that an organisation which works intensively just with young people, or do you actually create ties between the generations?
Answering, I'm very flattered to see that Madame Leuthard is on a Snapchat. I'm not on Snapchat at all, so I will subscribe tomorrow, I guess.
I can teach you.
Thank you. So Snapchat is already something that I don't really understand or use. So I stopped at WhatsApp, actually. So, but anyway, so to answer your question, yes, and I think the interesting thing with what we're doing is bridging different, or building gaps, building gaps, building bridges between different sectors and different generations. And the interesting thing, so we have different projects, one being a prize. It's called the Human Rights Watch Prize, and we work with Human Rights Watch, so the NGO, and in partnering with the local high schools in Geneva, École Moser and different schools. And the interesting thing here in Switzerland, so we have the Travail de Maturité, Maturaarbeit, to do, and we try to engage and promotes the opportunity for students to do a work on a topic related to human rights. And then there's a competition, and the winner gets an internship at Human Rights Watch. And the interesting thing for us then is then to show to the students at 17 years old, you can already engage in an NGO, doing an internship, and then learning from within how basically this whole world of human rights work. Another thing we're doing is also a photography award. They're working with universities, La Haide, the ECAL, also in Lausanne, and we're offering kind of a platform for young artists to enter the professional market. And there, interestingly enough, also is then we work with jury members who are very accomplished professionals who then not only choose the different projects that are exhibited in an art gallery, but also who kind of mentor the younger generation of artists. So we try to, as much as possible, to offer opportunities for the different generations to meet up and to work together toward a common cause. And the only thing I want to say here is that when you find the right topic of interest to different generations, then I think it's easier to engage the two extremes. And human rights is definitely one of those topics.
Das wollte ich Sie genau.
It's exactly what I wanted to ask you. When there is a joint engagement, could it be that the difference between generations is quickly forgotten? Since you have a common goal, you would forget about the fact that you belong to different generations.
Still there, I think I mean, the gap is difficult to speak about gap because in the end, we speak the same language. I mean, obviously, even if we talk about Snapchats, that's not going to make the gap bigger, I guess, or wider. But we not only spoke the same language, but I think the concerns that we are facing currently are more or less the same that the older generation was also facing. And I think somehow we have a lot to learn from the older generation, then in order for us to better know, not only acquire expertise and experience, but also better know with the current context what we have to keep and what we can throw off or away in order then for us to find our own path. So I wouldn't see it as a problem, but rather if you find the right way, I guess, as a strength for both extremes.
Ich finde, wir haben bis jetzt eine schöne.
Well, I would say we took stock quite well. We had a picture, a snapshot of our society, and we have examples of what you can find there. Now I'm coming to the second topic, democracy. We could have a pointed thesis and say what happens is totally unjust. Why 54% of Swiss population are older than 40 years old? Age-old, ancient, according to you. But of course, they can determine where the country is going, which would mean that the young people's future is determined by the older generation. Scientific study that I would like to launch right now is the following. How many young people who are younger than 30 years old have the feeling that it is slightly unjust that so many older people actually decide where the country is going and the fact that they have so much influence? Who would find this tendency a little uneasy? 38.4%, I would say. Now, who among the young people does not think that this is unjust? Who feels that this is not a problem at all? 2/3, 1/3, I would say, if my estimate is correct. Direct democracy. Well, and I would like to put another question. Who would say it's fair as it is? I would say that basically fair. That's the way democracy works. I would say it is the task of politicians to protect minorities. Lara, what do you think? I would have said it's unfair. I said it's unfair. I said it's unfair as well. Unfair as well. So we took stock, we took the temperature. Mrs. Caviezel, what do you think? Is there a feeling of unease that something is wrong? Because of demographic development, the older group grows, and one woman, one man, one vote. Is that unfair? I don't think it's unfair. I can understand that so many young people lifted their hands. I think that in Switzerland and in the rest of the world, different generations think differently. And young people probably hope for something else than older generations who have accumulated more experience. But I don't think it is a real topic that should be based on the fact that the younger generation thinks one way and the older generation another way. I think that basically we have to have an all-encompassing topic. For instance, what are the triggering factors? Why do we have these challenges in Switzerland and in the rest of the world, and what do we have to do? I don't think that the generational gap is really responsible for the political results in the national and international development that we have today. I think it is much rather a matter of being conscious in a different way and manner. We had to rethink our paradigm. How can we manage all the challenges that we're faced with? So, in other words, you do not attribute this to generations and generational gaps. Mrs. Leuthard, I have to say that if I read the papers, I saw that one cantonal parliament that would have to have a weighting system among the votes. One person, one vote is basically our system. So I was a bit angry when I read that. But how do you react to these ideas? Should we give more weight to young people's votes? Answer, well, I think this is impossible in a democracy. We have other minorities, the French-speaking community, the Italian-speaking community, and the Romansh-speaking community. These are all minorities. It would only be dangerous if all, quote-unquote, old people think alike and vote alike, and this is not the case. Young people don't think alike either, and this is the same thing in all generations. Well, one could ask, for instance, would you like to cut pensions? Then the older generation would vote no. Well, I think it is a task for young people and for politicians to say in this discussion, for instance, the pension reform. There is a justified interest to have the conversion rate in the second pillar to cut it, because otherwise you have a massive redistribution of wealth towards future old-age pensioners. Everybody who is older than 50 years old would benefit disproportionately, and that would be a burden for the younger generation. That would be unjust. And the older people would have to say, well, I can see that, but I'm also in favor of my children and my grandchildren. They should get something too. And these are the arguments you have to use. You have to talk to various generations. You said this would be a just system where all generations have a chance of a good future. I think this is what policy and politics would have to achieve. Of course, young people can say, we're here, we're talking about our future as well, and think of it, don't be egotistical. Which means that the younger people will go and vote? Well, the voting age, when I was in the National Council, I said, well, I really want to do something for young people, for the younger generation. And we discussed a possible voting age of 16. I had no chance. But in certain communities, it was decided to discuss the issues. And I think in the French-speaking part of Switzerland, there are more communities where we talk about it than in the German-speaking part of Switzerland. For instance, when you build a school, I think it would be good because you also have youth parliaments so that young people learn how to argument. Well, who goes to vote regularly among those who are younger than 25? The others, I don't think they actually showed up. Mr. Scherer, what do you think? I would like to add something. We're always talking about generational gap or not, and sometimes you talk about a war between generations. It has been scientifically proven that this does not exist. What there is, and you can possibly say that that's almost the same thing. There are great differences between the rich and the poor. And there are other topics where generations don't think alike. But to actually simply say it's generational, that would be wrong. Well, if you measure it and have a systematic look at it, these interests don't clash. They don't clash. There are different opinions, of course, and this is exactly what the president said. But that's normal. Depending on the experience one has made, one has one opinion or another. Within a family, the differences are smaller than they used to be. If we think of the 80s, the youth unrest, the drug problems, there was a real divide between parents and children. And we don't have this divide any longer. If you have a look at families, of course, there are certain differences which would be expressed in politics. But one interesting observation, I imagine this, for instance, one used to have greater differences in clothing as well. Today, sometimes it's difficult to say who's a mother, who's a daughter. Same thing with sons and fathers. But I would say that we actually went through similar school systems. Most of us were in anti-authoritarian kindergartens where the children say, well, do we have to play just like we want to again today? Well, if you have a look at material interest, this is the case. If you say that the older generation take away pensions from the younger people. When I was 25, I had my first job, a second pillar, and I was told when you turn 65, this is what you get. Every year I got this sheet. One knew exactly when one was 26 years old, in 40 years I have to stop working. But this is what it's like in Switzerland. But I felt that there was a deal between me and the state and the law, and we have to stick to it. But of course, politicians might see things differently. We said, well, we have to take care of future generations as well. Well, a generational treaty has to be renegotiated, and this is the phase we're in now. Young people are correct in saying, well, I am still a citizen of this country as well. I contribute to the system, which is why we have to renegotiate a new fair contract. It's difficult. And it will be interesting when people vote. Prosthetic Tute plays a role as well. It depends on whether they can convince their members to say, show some solidarity. You might get a little less, but you still have to agree to this new treaty. I think this is a discussion that has to take place. And this actually makes the strength of a society. If you manage to do that, if everybody says, yes, this is fair, and it corresponds to the contributions everybody makes, and you have a certain guarantee once you reach old pensions age. In Switzerland, we've managed so far, and I really hope that we would keep on doing it, because this would be a failure of the discussion. I would now like to put a question. Well, there were very interesting discussions in the Federal Council. Can you feel a generational gap within the Federal Council as well? Well, that's difficult for me. Well, you can speak openly here. Well, we discuss things very openly. But technology skills, of course, I mean, there you can feel. My colleague Berset is the youngest member of the Federal Council, and he has much more experience than I have, and I can feel that. But we have to take care of everybody. We are responsible for all citizens of this country, which is why we really try to understand, which is why I value highly if people tell me what they feel is unjust, what they don't like and what they do like. The only way of learning what people think is by conducting dialogue. Mr. Ghavami, what do you think about the fairness in the democratic system?
There's in Switzerland, there's definitely, when we talk about votes, there's this Rosti-Graben that we hear a lot. But I think there's an age-Graben, maybe also, somehow, by maybe two different ways. The one is the topics that are discussed at the parliamentary level and on which we have to vote, and the Renreform, for example, the example you gave before, I think there's a definite difference between a topic that is of concern of the elder. I mix now German and English, sorry, but by the older generation, and I think that is a topic that affect them directly, and they will retire in 1, 2, 5 years maybe, or they already are retired, so they are fighting to keep something that they already have, whereas for us, if we have to vote on that, it's going to be like in 20, maybe 30 years, which will be way too far away for us to now project ourselves in something that maybe in 30 years will change completely. So I think that is definitely one difference. One makes one challenge, I think. And the other challenge is then for us also to be able to put at the decision-making table topics that are of our interests. And I think there's not enough platforms for us then to gather up around a common voice to speak from this age group, 18 to 35, I'd say, saying that is our concerns, that is something that we want to tackle and that we think would be important for not only us but the next generations. And then how shall we then bring it to the table to the political levels and make sure that the politicians understand our concerns also. I think that there are definitely new challenges. So the age gap was already there, I guess, maybe bigger, wider, because this population in Switzerland is older. Everywhere, actually, in developed countries, the population gets older. But I think we have also to find ways for us, this generation, to re-motivate us, to find new ways to get more interested in politics, and to be able also to speak out for our own concerns and defend our interests. And I think that doesn't really exist in Switzerland yet.
Frau Caviezel.
Mrs. Caviezel, I suppose that you would not support this thesis of a generational gap. Well, of course there are differences. We said that at the outset as well, but we really have to rethink matters. We have to start taking over responsibility. At least that's what it seems like today, that very often one is quite egocentric. What would benefit me and what is good for me. And we totally forget about the fact that we're a community. We're part of a community, and this is where sustainability starts. We have to say that it's not only about me and what's good for me, we have to think about the good for others as well. The common good is exactly what's been said. We have to ask, how can I satisfy the needs of my generation without jeopardizing the free choice of a style of life, of a lifestyle for future generations, without them having to bear the consequences of what we're doing today. And this is a process of rethinking. Well, this is the kind of learning process everybody has to undergo. Yes, well, there are young people who feel that they're agents of change. They said, well, we want an impact, we want to change the world. We saw that in the video in the beginning. Sustainability is important. We have to make sure that we can steer our world into a different direction. We have a number of challenges that are reality. For instance, climate change. These are important phenomena. But there are older people who share these ideas, and they says, yes, we really have to rethink matters. We cannot keep going like we used to. We cannot simply squander resources. We cannot simply allow it to that people today live and burden future generations. Well, one could imagine a generation of grey panthers and a young panthers. Green, maybe? No, that would be insulting. Well, I would like to talk about sustainability, because this is a universal basic premise of our life. We have to make everything sustainable now, and in order to be able to implement it, we need solidarity. What we have inherited is what we've inherited from earlier generations with the old age pension funds and the second pillar, based on solidarity. But solidarity can only be upheld if older and younger citizens discuss matters, if they try to understand each other, and if they develop the future together. Well, practically, is that possible? Do you organize meeting days? Camps? Well, there's a number of approaches. We have a federalist country. So there are meeting cafes, there's neighborhood support. There are a number of projects that try to approach different generations. We have a pre-honors competition where the third and fourth generation reads the same books as the first and second generation, and then they compare notes. Basically, we have to see what it means to small children. For instance, when the grandfather or grandmother dies. There are a number of very good approaches and projects. For instance, living together, multi-generational houses and homes. A lot of things are being done, but I think we have to do more.
Very important to find ways at the very local levels then to meet each other, to learn, to work together on common projects. But I have also this feeling that there's us, I guess, and you also, the younger generation somehow, we feel very much drawn by this, the immensity of the challenges that are ahead of us, and not only talking about the local level, what kind of job we will have, if we will have a pension afterward or not, if our salaries will be high enough or not, but also the global crisis, like refugee crisis, which is affecting us. And this question is, but then what should we do? And is there an answer, a mutig answer at the political level, then, which will then give us hope somehow to know that there are answers and that we can look forward to the future, because somehow we feel, because of globalizations, but we will talk about that a little bit later also, but we feel somehow that it is important for us to engage on those kind of topics as well. Not only the local level, but somehow feel this responsibility, shared responsibilities, that is for us to find common solutions on those kind of global challenges that are affecting Switzerland more and more.
Ja, ich würde das gerne
But I would like to support what Mr. Ghavami has just said. I don't think that you can expect that you get help automatically, and that your interests will be automatically represented. I think you have to organize matters and you have to commit. If we get the feeling that you're not interested, that the only thing that's interesting for you in the future is what you can influence in your private sphere, then things get difficult. And here, older generations are better organized. Yes, but Madam President, I must say, I can see what you mean. You have to organize in order to reach something, but the shapes of organization change. If you then sit in a local cafe and have to give a speech in front of 7 sad people sitting there, well, we must find some kind of different form and shapes of concerting and discussion. Of course, you can do it via internet, and I would be one who would vote over internet immediately instead of going to actually vote. Well, I think that media are hold great potential for the young people. You can meet with your friends, even if it's a virtual meeting. You can exchange opinions. You can talk to each other over the media. You probably don't read the manuals for voting. They're not terribly sexy, no, but they're not that interesting. But you should read them. For instance, we have a comic book. For instance, in February, you have complex topics like corporate tax. And there is a comic film that actually explains the issue in 3 minutes. It means it doesn't take you 2 hours to read the whole booklet. But I would say that political parties and communities should try to find an easily accessible form so that young people would get interested. Oh, you have these comic films already? Yes, we do. It's a trial phase. Well, I find it shocking that you're not aware. Mr. Klapproth, this is your duty. Next time I meet with you, I would like to hear from you whether you like it or didn't. Well, I learned a comic by heart. So far, I read my way through the booklets, and they were boring. But anyway, I would like to take the temperature again among our students here. In a few sentences, how do you picture your future, your material future? Are you a bit afraid, or are you saying, well, I don't care at this point? Or when you watch TV or you read the papers, do you think, what is to become of me once I have finished my training or my studies? Raphael, what do you feel when you say, well, pension systems have to be reformed and so on and so forth? Well, basically, at this point, there are a lot of changes within society. And I have a feeling that many people will be losers, and we have to fight to stay on top. But I also have a feeling that many people try to keep things as they are and to not have any change. So you're not afraid at this point. You don't have sleepless nights. No. But a slightly uneasy feeling, yes. Yes, I do. Kimberly? I agree. I don't really have a very good feeling as far as that goes either. But I would say simply that young people don't necessarily try to oppose the older generation's opinion. We can certainly share their opinions if they can put clear arguments. We are all students in cantonal schools. We don't have a choice. We have political science as a subject, and we have to actually learn about it. But if we give us reasons on why you feel like you feel, we think that we're perfectly able to share your opinion. Do you get a feeling that you simply get it slapped on your plate? No, not necessarily. It really depends on the individuals. For instance, in my family, we sit together during dinner and we discuss the initiatives. We have the booklet, and my parents try to explain to me how it works. And if I share their opinion, this is what I will vote for. At school, we discuss these matters among young people, and I think there should be a mix in between. We don't really have the chance to discuss matters with older people, because I don't think a lot of people get the chance to discuss in their families like I do. But you would like it. Yes, I find it interesting. Prosenectute, do you create platforms where people can speak openly and reason? We do have such platforms, but less in a political sphere. We really talk more about the experiences we've had when we were younger, and we actually share stories. But you don't fight for a better argument? Well, the young people should also have a chance to defend their opinions. Well, you talked about the gymnastics club. Is that where you discuss matters, or don't you? Do you dare talk about these topics? Yes, usually when we're having a beer. But we certainly do discuss political topics as well.
Kyoto, are you worried about the future? I wouldn't say I was afraid, but I do think about what's going to happen. It's quite unpredictable. I think that the young and the old should speak together more, exchange their views. It's good that there are platforms, cafes, but it's also up to young people to make the approach. I've chosen my work placement because I really wanted to speak with the older generation. I'm really talking about the older generation here, the 50s, 60s and above. I wanted to hear what they thought. Old people always want to speak. You always feel that they enjoy a good conversation, and they're quite wide-ranging, these conversations. I have to say that I've had wonderful conversations. One that went on for 2 hours with a single person. We could have talked even longer, but I then had to go and do another job. So it's important that young people make the approach themselves, and it's also important for elder people as well. But maybe a bit more difficult for these things to be done at their own initiatives because they might have mobility issues, for example. But young people can make the initiative themselves. Lara, what's your view about the future, the distant future, and also in response to this question about what it's like when you speak with the older generation? Well, I think that there are many young people who have a lot of access to information, but because we haven't started our work yet, we don't really have much experience about the pension system, for example. We don't know about these 3 pillars which are part of the system. So perhaps our experience and information isn't at the same level as, say, our parents' generation who are directly affected by it. So it's not our fault that we can't speak at the same level of experience at the moment. We really have to understand what it's about, and we also have to understand that we're entitled to do so. And I think when you have this, the respect for our position, and we're duly informed, then we can have a good conversation. The elder generation isn't better organized, but I do think that they are better represented politically. You said that the older generation was in the majority and do more to get the information out there to you so that it can be easily accessed. I think you have a natural interest in what's going to happen after work, and your personal involvement with that, for example, looking for an apprenticeship, is the start. So when you have to pay for your transport, when you see there are deductions from whatever you're being paid, well, then you really have a need. And when that need arises, we need to make sure that the channels of communication are open and the information is available. Mr. Ghavami?
You're really right, and the comment is a good one. But I guess definitely the older generation is good organized, but we have so many communication channels. We speak a lot, we communicate, and we exchange a lot. Not always on the very or the most interesting topics, or not really always related to politics, I would say. But then I think we already have that in hands, and we know how to use it. Whereas the older generation is a little bit lost with Snapchat and all the other instruments. But I think the technology is already there, and there are many ways for us to voice our concerns, I think. Then it's a story, how are we certain that the politicians listen to those concerns and take them into consideration? I think that is one thing. Then how, and this beauty of new technology also gives us access to direct feedback. We can tweet with Madame Leuthard. We can tweet with other presidents worldwide, which are not always doing the best tweets. But anyway, we use that we can use that as a very powerful tool. Then it's definitely also a way to try to understand how this new technology can then be used by the existing structures to reinvent themselves a little bit, and then better engage this younger generation, which I feel it a little bit sad also. I mean, we losing slowly the human contact, and in politics as well. But it is how we communicate now, and I think it is important then, maybe slowly, but a shift, a mental shift, I would say, then for us to feel a little bit more optimistic and a little bit more confidence, in order then to use and then to voice our concern to the older generation. And last thing, just about the political parties, they all have, rightly in Switzerland, a lot of youth forum, youth committees that are very well organized in cities and etc., organizing a lot of events. But we have I have somehow this feeling also that those parties are somehow only or mainly used then to co-opt youth leaders in order to bring them in the older party. And I think there must be also something that has to be done in order then to reinvent how we engage here in Switzerland at a very local and concrete political level, I think.
Frau Caviezel, before ich dann...
Ms. Caviezel, before I open up to the questions. Yeah, I'd like to pick up on the points that were made from the first row there. I think what's behind all of this and the motivation that's required for young people is the discussion of responsibility. Everybody needs to understand that they can make their own contribution, that they have a responsibility to do that, whether we're talking about pensions, environment, refugees. Everybody has the possibility to express their opinion, to get informed, and also to bring about change. So we need to raise awareness of that and also let people know that they have a certain responsibility to do this, and that there is the potential there through the means of communication that we have to channel all of this communication. And this can be done in an intergenerational way. We have to work together to address these various issues and work towards, and this is my buzzword, a sustainable future. Thank you very much. I want to open the floor now. We have a number of hands up. I can see in the middle of the room, and then I'll come to you. Time speeds by, so we don't have much time left. If you could keep your questions as short as possible. Thank you.
Good afternoon, esteemed panel.
Guten Tag, Mein Name ist Gail Davis und ich habe selber eine Initiative dieser Art lanciert. Ich werde versuchen, mich so kurz zu fassen wie möglich. Ich muss sagen, dass das ein sehr interessantes Panel ist. Ich danke Ihnen vielmals. Aber ich möchte da etwas sagen. Hormone. Wenn man 16 Jahre alt ist, hat man gewisse Hormone, einen Hormonspiegel. Wenn man 50 ist, hat man auch einen Hormonspiegel. Wenn man jung ist, wir setzen die Jugend ja wirklich unter Druck. Alle von ihnen haben die Möglichkeit gehabt, ihr Leben zu leben. Sie konnten ihre Reise unternehmen. Sie konnten eben so leben, wie sie wollten, vom ersten Lebensjahr an bis heute. Das wollte ich nochmal sagen. Eine Studie hat auch gezeigt, dass bis die jungen Leute mal an die Universität gegangen sind, die Universität abgeschlossen haben und dann einen Arbeitsplatz gehabt haben, können sie eigentlich nicht so richtig verstehen, wie man lebt. Wenn man 16 Jahre alt ist, hat man einen Hormonspiegel, schlägt die Tür zu und sagt, Mami, ich will dir nicht zuhören. Wir müssen also den jungen Leuten dabei helfen, heranzuwachsen. Das war eines, was ich sagen wollte. Aber noch etwas. Politisch müssen wir hier die Regierung unterstützen und in Partnerschaft mit der Regierung arbeiten. Wir sagen den älteren Leuten, dass man das Pensionsalter anheben will, aber wir geben ihnen nicht die Arbeitsplätze, die dazu notwendig sind. Wir sprechen auch mit den jungen Leuten heute, aber das war nicht immer so. Wir sind gemeinsam aufgewachsen und haben gemeinsam gearbeitet. Es hat noch nie eine solche Polarisierung gegeben, aber wenn es eine Polarisierung gibt, dann wird es Gräben geben. Die müssen wir aber überbrücken. Sie wollen ganz einfach älteren Leuten beibringen, wie man mit Computern umgeht. Also wir müssen gemeinsam arbeiten.
Dann hatten wir in der gleichen.
Thank you very much. And I think in the same row we had someone asking for the floor. Someone else had their hand up. Yes. Thanks for giving us the chance to ask questions. And my name is Treto Gasser. I'm 38. And despite my advanced age, I think it's still possible to set trends and not just jump on bandwagons. And I think that's what's happening a lot today, unfortunately. I'd like to call on you to step back from social media and the constant flow of news to be able to form your own opinions. I trained in IT, and our lecturer said to us, always, first of all, think what you want to do with these devices. Thank you very much again for making that call for action. You can do that. You can ask questions. You can make comments. Here we have a gentleman with a white jacket. Thank you. I have two short questions. As I'm from Germany, we talked a lot about age, but very little about social policy conditions which are changing. We've got new devices, mobile phones, smartphones. Communication has changed a lot. Obviously, that's got negative aspects. From a Swiss perspective, we've got a high unemployment out in the world. Many countries have very high unemployment, levels we couldn't have imagined a generation ago, 2 generations ago. So my question is, obviously, every parent wants to hand on the world in a better condition. But if I look at the world today, 65 million refugees, huge natural disasters, the Paris Agreement of the UN, unending wars, I don't know if we are handing the world over in a better condition. So my question is, what should we do in order to give the generation a better world? These are questions which are pressing. They're not generational questions alone. It's about what policy should we adopt to ensure that the world's in a better condition for the next generation. Thank you very much. Just very many points. We live in glorious isolation where youth unemployment is very low. There are countries where 50% youth unemployment exists, so that's a very alarming situation. Yes, I think there are two aspects to that. If you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, the world has made progress over the last 40 years. Fewer people in poverty, fewer people who have no access to health services, to electricity, to education. So there's a big improvement there over the situation 30, 40 years ago. But there's still a lot to do. And the question then arises, what do these new technologies bring with them? Will they destroy many jobs? Now, are those concerns justified? If they are, what can we do about them? You mentioned the Paris Agreement. I think that represents huge progress, that 195 countries came together in Paris, signed an agreement, and said, stop. We have established a common goal. We have to act together against climate change. And they have all committed themselves to these targets. And now it's not just about putting their signature on an agreement, it's about putting their commitment into action. And at the local level, at the national level, parliaments need to approve that. Local groups need to contribute in their own way to examine their own lifestyles and see what they can do to improve the situation. I think the open forum here brings attention to these issues, that it's necessary within the international context to recognize the role that generations have to play. Switzerland has to play a part. The young generation has to play a part. I've spoken to representatives of countries today that have high youth unemployment, that have huge numbers of refugees, and we can't just live in this splendid isolation. We need to recognize our role in the international context. We need to ensure that the situation in the world improves. Now, obviously it's easy to make nice speeches, but to put them into practice subsequently requires the involvement of the people behind these governments, and that's the responsibility of the governments, it's the responsibility of business as well. Now, you've reminded us that we should say something else about the third major issue which I've raised, namely the question of whether the process of disruption, the fourth industrial revolution, digitalization, whether that will just change the game completely. Are we going to be replaced by robots and computers? And the only jobs that will remain would be rock stars and artists. Then we'd all be in the same boat, young and old. Is this digital revolution going to completely change the rules of the game? How do you as a politician see that? There was a professor from MIT who gave a presentation yesterday talking about the effect on the labor market going through each industrial revolution up until now. The first industrial revolution, 1860, saw the same fears. People saying, wow, the machines are on their way, they're going to replace the jobs. And in certain sectors, there is no doubt that that is the case. Jobs will be replaced. But each industrial revolution brings with it the creation of new jobs. So we need to prepare. And the best way to do that is through different training and education. The young generation here is far ahead of us. They have in their education the necessary skills. So I'm not so worried about that prospect, but we do need to prepare thoroughly. We have a real responsibility as politicians to do that preparation, to ensure that the world of work is ready for the oncoming changes. Otherwise, we'll be failing our responsibilities. So I'm turned to the front bench again here. Are you confident that there will be exciting jobs in the future and you're not worried about what's on the way? Or are you too pessimistic? Are you afraid? No, it would seem not. Are any of you young people out there about the fourth industrial revolution taking your jobs away? Yeah. We have a mic here, please. You talk about the digitalization and saying that that's important to us young people, but I think that just increases the gap between young and old. Now, obviously, parents don't have the same technological skills as we do, but I think the fact that it's a lot more interesting to see the possibilities of the technology and the possibility for contact that they create. We've talked about the various initiatives that exist, for example, cooking with elderly people or bringing people together. Why can't you do more with these initiatives personally?
Completely right.
Ich möchte ein paar Sachen sagen, aber da haben Sie völlig recht. Nichts wird jemals die menschliche...
Technology should be really be understood as a tool to achieve something greater than as a mean in itself. And it's going to depend on us how we will use it and what we will make out of it. That's for sure. So if it's used in order to do something bigger, better, then it's something very positive, but it will never replace human interactions. What I will just say also is that, which is very important to me, which goes to the comment that has been made before, is that we are very lucky in Switzerland, very, very lucky in Switzerland. And we are already at a very high level compared to other countries in Europe. And I think we have somehow this responsibility, us here at the panel, but also you, to give kind of the example, to show that it is possible to go another way than just closing borders and think that before was better, basically. And technology is one of those things, if used wisely, that we actually be used in order to be very optimistic about the future. But going really against this whole idea that closing borders and will make us worse, I think. So yeah, that was my comment.
Herr Scherrer, aus Sicht der Grauen Panther.
Well, Mr. Schiffer, from the point of view of the Grey Panthers, this technology, do you think it will bring the possibility for greater closeness or increase the divide? I went to a presentation on robots, and that was a very interesting session. It was very interesting to see these young researchers working with these robots to ensure that people who were paralyzed could walk again. So they had a demonstration where a paralyzed individual was able to walk very slowly around the room. There were a number of people in wheelchairs there, obviously interested in those developments. Now, those developments at the moment are very clumsy, very awkward. In the break, I spoke to someone saying, well, this is like going back to that first mobile phone, which was huge and very awkward. Within a couple of years, it had become something that was a huge industry with huge progress. So you have to see the possibilities.
Just forgot to say one thing is a critical thing regarding this change of new technological advancement. We have to ask ourselves questions about the educational system, because I think also is how to prepare ourselves better in order then to use those techniques in a good way. And I think in order to make sure there is no gap between school and then profession afterwards, then is learning at a very young age what to do with this that we have in our hands, something very powerful.
Frau Caviezel, auch an Sie noch die Frage.
Ms. Caviezel, is new technology going to make the divide bigger or smaller? Well, I think as long as there is education and information and explanation, then it doesn't need to be made wider. I think that we need to see the next developments coming as well. It's great that nobody feels fear about the future, but changes are still going to come, and we need to be ready to respond to them. If you look at the requirements that businesses have to young people today in terms of qualifications, it's becoming a lot more difficult. This idea of going through multiple jobs, acquiring multiple qualifications, it's very difficult, and that could create difficulties for people who can't manage this. I think in society we shouldn't get lost in this idea of an over-performance culture. Quite often I speak to people who are now in their 20s who say they've been working on their CV since they were 10. So that over-focus on achievement could be further exacerbated by this process of digitalization. Well, quite often, if you look on the requirements that are necessary for a job, I mean, you probably, President, might not qualify for an assistant position for young people in the Parliament at the moment. Yeah, we have 5 more minutes, please. More questions. Alec Gagnon. I'm an engineer, and I've worked with robots as well. For the producers of robots, unemployment is a success. Robots have been designed to make life easier for people, to do the job that people have done. The question is, what do we do when robots are doing all our work? There are obviously jobs they can't replace, but in the future we might have to do a lot less work. There's this talk of basic income. There's the talk of distributing work more evenly. Neither of those have come to pass yet. One possibility in Davos is to recognize that there is more money today in the world than ever before, and that maybe we should welcome the fact that machines can do our work while at the same time ensuring that we all lead a decent life. With regard to the limitation of energy and consumerism, I agree with you, but then I don't understand why our government says every year that we need more GDP, we need more growth. I don't understand why it has to grow. If it grows, then that's great, but the government's policy is an absolute requirement for growth, and that's not sustainable. We can't get onto that question with the few minutes that remain, but I think we can repeat the well-known fact that the world is changing fast, that we have to be ready for these changes. I don't think that we should fall into a pessimistic attitude. Churchill once said, "Of course, I'm an optimist." It's not very useful not being an optimist. And I think that's a position that we all share. So from the perspective that we've taken, and from the recognition that there isn't a huge divide between the generations, then we come to our conclusion. Perhaps you could say what you've picked up from this session, or what final message you want to give, something that we can do to change the situation. Mr. Schauer, may I start with you? For me, sustainable use of resources is essential. And by resources, I also mean working time, not just material resources. That is essential for the elderly. It's absolutely essential that we have a transition into retirement which is sustainable, for example, by gradually reducing working hours. Businesses can contribute there. We also don't want younger people to end up in a situation as they get older where they have to take care of both their parents and their children. Ms. Caviezel, yes, I think we need to be clear about what's coming, that we examine ourselves and ask whether we could live with more responsibility, leave perhaps a smaller ecological footprint, and do that in the context of living in a community. Thank you very much. Mr. Ghavami.
I think we have definitely a lot to learn from each other. The older generation and the younger generation, and not only to learn from each other, but also to work together toward common goals. And in the end, we have the same, more or less, but the same interest. And we are aspiring for the same things, basic things. So better working than excluding each other. And then the other thing I would say to the younger generation, the whole audience, but saying basically that there are so many opportunities, especially and specifically here in Switzerland, not only here in Davos, because we're really lucky to be here somehow, but also the fact that thanks to technology and to all the access that we have here in Switzerland, we can do a lot more, I think.
Frau Bundespräsidentin.
The Swiss president, quite often I say to panelists, if you were president of Switzerland, what would you do? Well, I have you. You're president for a year. What are you going to do? Well, the world's certainly not getting any simpler. It's becoming more complex. Processes of change are underway, and we can't predict accurately what's around the corner. I think what society and government can do is raise awareness of what we need to prepare ourselves for so that we don't rush blindly into change. I agree with Ms. Caviezel that we need to take responsibility for our own lives. We need to recognize that we have responsibility for cooperation, for networking. I think that people are happy if they have some kind of structure in their lives, some kind of work that enables them to live autonomously, to determine their own life according to their own wishes. Safety and security is obviously becoming more important, as, of course, is the issue of the environment. If we can raise awareness then, and awareness of the responsibility that we have to shape our future within an international context, then I believe we'll be okay. And with your excellent education, you are aware of that. And you can decide now what career path you're undertaken, where you live, how you move. These are everyday decisions. They're your decisions, your responsibility. And we all can have a huge impact to both decide on what we want to do and change our habits, change and not let ourselves be changed. Thank you very much to all of the panelists and also to you in the audience for your participation, your very exciting contributions. From the perspective of the young generation, you have the future ahead of you. Pablo Picasso said that you need a long time to become young. And all of us, even if we're over 35, can take that lesson on board. It's extremely valuable to hear what you've said today. Jean-Paul Sartre said, the young people have a longing for the future. They're homesick for the future. So we would say that if only I were 20 years old today with my contact, if only I were 20 years old but with the contact book I have today. So thank you very much indeed for your participation.